Hi, I'm Caroline Labor, money mindset expert and CPA. And today we're going to talk about what my accounting career taught me about money mindset. So let's get into it. Now I want to start this off by saying that I've had a very different kind of accounting career to what most people would picture. So throughout the 17 years that I was a qualified accountant, I often had people say to me, "You don't look like an accountant." And I'm guessing that's because when you think of an accountant, most people think of, those people who do tax returns and, maybe bookkeeping and sort of things to like support small businesses. And that's not the kind of accountant that I was. So I was actually in a field called management accounting. And for the majority of my accounting career, I worked for Australia's largest media company. And I actually managed the company's budget. So, billions of dollars of like revenue and expenses. And I worked for a chief financial officer. And we had like over 100 people in our finance team. So it was a really big finance function. So what happens when you have a finance team that big is the structure is kind of like a pyramid. And what I mean by this, if you kind of picture a pyramid, is that you have the CFO at the top, and then you've got, a bunch of directors that sit under the CFO. Then you've got different levels of managers, and then you have lots and lots of analysts that, make up that group of 100 people. And so what ends up happening in that kind of structure is that you have this never-ending cycle of analysts wanting to be managers and then managers wanting to be directors. And it's only ever a small percentage of those people that actually breaks through to the next level. And so throughout my finance career, I personally did want to break through and get to the senior levels of management, which I did. But I actually got very curious about why some people succeed and others don't. And in particular, what I noticed is that, those who do break through to those senior levels of management, they tend to do it quite young. So contrary to sort of that belief that, you've got to do your time and it'll take you like loads and loads of years of experience to get there. And by the way, I'm not advocating that you don't need experience like in a lot of these roles. Certainly to sort of get to like a commercial manager level, like you do need a fair amount of experience to be able to know like how to evaluate business proposals and really go through and review company budgets. So you definitely do need experience, but if I had to sort of put an age around it, what I'm kind of getting at is that, if most accountants in my field sort of start in their early 20s, then those who do make it through to that management level, so working for the CFO, often many of them do it like in their late 20s, so before they turn 30, which can seem quite young because there are a lot of other people who stay at that analyst level for much longer than that. And I certainly managed quite a number of analysts who even by their mid-30s, were desperate to break through that next level and just couldn't work out why they didn't get promoted. Now, I'm not sharing all of this, to bore you with accounting. What I really want to tell you about today is that I realize that some people succeed and others don't because of their money mindset. And, it took me like a while to learn this for myself, and I experienced it firsthand because in the early part of my career, I found that I was sort of just rotating, like doing a similar type of job, but, for different business areas. And I couldn't work out why, other people around me were progressing and why I wasn't. And, eventually through a lot of the work that I did, like with coaching and working on my own personal development, I realized that I had money blocks that were keeping me stuck. And, after I learned how to break through those money blocks, I was able to fast track my way through to the leadership team. And it was sort of like a natural progression because I was operating in the flow of, what it was like to be a leader. And it didn't feel like I had this desperation anymore of, really, really wanting to be a manager. It just started to come naturally and I started to get promotion after promotion. And so here's the kicker. This is what I learned about promotions. People don't get promoted because it's their money mindset that causes them to put a self-imposed ceiling on their income. So let me repeat that. What stops people getting promoted is that their money mindset causes them to put a self-imposed ceiling on their income. And so even though there's this part of them that really wants to get that next promotion so that they can make more money, there's another part of their mind, and a much stronger part, that is saying you can't do it. You're not worthy of earning that much money. No one in your family has ever done this before. Who are you to make that kind of money? And all of those feelings and those beliefs is actually what stops people from breaking through and being able to get promoted. And what they don't realize is that it's these beliefs that cause them to behave in such a way so that, they're always viewed as junior. So it might be through things they say or how they approach tasks that causes people to say, yeah, you know what, that person isn't quite ready for a promotion. And a classic example of this is I would often hear people say, oh, well, that's just way above my pay grade. And even though, you might argue in some cases that might be technically correct. So what they were trying to say there was, the task seemed way too hard for what they were getting paid. By being unwilling to do that task, that would give people the impression that, well, you're really not ready for that next step up because you're not willing to challenge yourself. And so people would say these things like almost kind of as a joke, but it would give real insight into what their money mindset was like. And so I realized how common this problem was when I ran a mindset workshop for our finance team. So I was actually in charge of running what we called finance transformation. So automating a lot of our systems and processes, but because of the mindset work that I'd done, I knew that a lot of the problem was mindset. And so in this particular workshop, I was helping a lot of the analysts to work on their self-development. And I asked people to raise their hand if they thought that someday they would be the CFO of our company. And to my surprise, well, no, actually I wasn't surprised. I kind of expected this. Nobody put up their hand. And, I'm not saying by any means that you have to want to be a CFO, like it's a really tough job, high pressure. But what I realized was that, when I dug deeper into this, it's not that people didn't want that outcome. So, they said, yeah, of course, like that would be great, but there's no way that I would ever get there. Like I'm an analyst now, I'll be lucky if I make it to manager level, then you have to get to director level and only one person ends up being the CFO. So as if that would be me. And, what people didn't realize is that what they were saying was that particular outcome is impossible for me. So it's not an impossible outcome because someone's going to do it, but it's impossible for me. And by doing that, they not only impose a ceiling on their ability to be the CFO, they also impose a ceiling on their ability to get to that next level because they didn't realize that subconsciously by telling themselves that, well, I'm never going to be the CFO, that actually stops you from putting in the effort, putting in the initiative that it would take to even get through to the next level. So, that was a really valuable lesson that I learned because so many people felt, hard done by and thought that they should have been promoted by now. They've, done their years, they've proved themselves, but they didn't realize that they were still exhibiting behaviors that made people think that they weren't ready to take that next step up. And so to kind of flip this around, I want to share a story of where actually having a strong money mindset or being able to shift to an empowered money mindset really paid off. And this was actually my first ever success story in coaching. And what happened was I had an analyst who had been stuck at the same level for many, many years. And he sort of got so disheartened, he ended up leaving the company. And then a few years later, so I was at commercial manager level and I reached out to him to see how he was going and he was ready for a change. And so I asked him to come back and work for me again. And we kind of made this deal that if he came back and worked for me, I said I would personally, invest in his development and would help him get to commercial manager level, because that was his goal. And so, throughout the course of the next year, we did a lot of coaching sessions. We worked really hard on his money mindset and busted through some major limiting beliefs. And the amazing thing that happened was I actually ended up getting promoted myself. So I left the team and he ended up working for somebody else. And within a really short space of time, that person ended up seeing that leadership capability in him, and he did get promoted to, commercial manager level. And so I'm really proud of that, because he got promoted completely independent of me. So I wasn't the one who promoted him. Somebody else saw, that potential and that capability in him. And so that's an example of where if you're able to call out those limiting beliefs and you can bust through those, then, the sky's the limit. And actually the story gets even better, because that analyst ended up really realizing his potential, and he ended up starting several businesses and leaving his corporate career behind to, go and be successful in his own name. So it's really amazing to see what can happen when you're able to change your money energy, really work on your money mindset, and become someone who operates like with really empowered energy and self-belief. And so I hope that's a lesson that you can take into your own life and your own business to move closer to your goals. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and leave any questions, comments or video ideas in the comments below. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. Also, if you're interested in my free money mindset training, click on the link in the first comment below and it'll take you to a page where you can enter your name and email so I can send it straight to you. See you next time.